access, exposure, education are the ways that they see female role model. Who is in their sphere of influence? I think that is who influences them more than anything.
Yeah.
And then outside of that, who are they exposed to?
This is a Daughter Podcast where dads come to talk, think, and thrive with your host, Oscar and Blandon. Our mission is to cultivate a community of strong, mindful, and present fathers.
We want to curate honest conversations with all men, but especially those who have the honor of raising daughters.
Hey everyone, Oscar here, the Daughter Podcast. Welcome back. Landing over at the other side in good old Texas. How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right, man. It's the weekend, so did a little bit of running around, got a good workout in, and came home, and now I'm relaxing with the girl. So, yeah, been great.
All right.
How about you?
It's been going good. Been off for a couple weeks, off-ish, working here and there. Took a trip. I got him around family and made it back, and then trying to just resettle, kind of like a vacation from the vacation, if you will. So we're doing that. And the Olympics just started today, actually, or yesterday. Friday was the Olympic opening ceremony.
Yeah.
They just started, and it's one of those times for me where, particularly with my girls, they're not all that interested in all the sports that I like within the Olympics.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to watch them kind of get into it, because I like to really show them female role models within the Olympics, right? These people, women, men that have worked literally for 4 years, right? Like you look at a sprinter, worked 4 years to run a 10-second race. Well, hopefully faster. It's just in order to win. But it's such a big project for such a small time. And although we try to watch all the Olympics, I try to point out some of these female athletes, specifically for the girls, not because I want them to emulate them and go be that athlete for that sport, but more of the work. Look at this athlete, put in the work, did everything they needed to do, sacrificed things they need to sacrifice, got here. I say that because the Olympics started, and it really started to fit in with today's conversation, which getting into female role models, or just what our girls are exposed to on a day-to-day basis that allows them negatively and positively to think about themselves through these people.
Okay. All right. It looks like you came to work today. I'm glad.
Thank you.
That was very insightful and thought through, man. You've done a little homework today.
I've done some homework.
I'm
Now,
impressed.
when I look at female role models, right? So if you go on there and you type in female role models onto Google or whichever search engine you look for, female role models come up. And it's interesting because they're female role models that I heard of when I was growing up.
Yeah.
You probably heard of when you were growing up. And still stand the test of time. They are female role models. They pushed the limits. They did things that no one else was doing. For example, Amelia Earhart, right? That she popped on there. Harriet, Tubman, just to name two. A bunch of female role models come up. And although we do talk about them, in fact, my daughters did. My oldest, I think last year, did a whole project on Harriet Tubman, and we have a museum out here. We went and looked at that. I'm sorry, no, that was in Ohio. So we had a museum out in Ohio, in Columbus, Ohio. She went through the Underground Railroad and all these different things that allowed her to see these feats of just impossibility people were doing, female role models. But are these the female role models that our daughters are looking for or looking at currently? That's really where I started questioning that. On the surface, my first answer is no. Like, they're looking at pop stars, they're looking at YouTubers, like that's who they're looking at. And let's face it, man, I personally have not found a pop star or YouTuber that I would say, yeah, you should totally model yourself after this person.
Right. Well, because I mean, I think it was a lot easier back in the day. I sound ancient by saying back in the day, but I think a lot of times because you didn't get everybody's personal story, you didn't see and have access to what was going on in their personal lives unless you read like gossip magazines. But what would happen was you would get this highlight clip of somebody, how they performed either on their job or the achievement that they had or the feat that they went through. And there was no getting behind the backstory. There, a lot of celebrities and a lot of people that were propped up in front of us were super private, lived very private lives. And so you did not get the quote unquote BTS, as everybody says, behind the scenes. And that's what everybody wants now. Everybody is looking behind the scene. And so you can see a lot of these people's personal failures. And so then it's harder for you to say, oh yeah, I want my daughter to be like this woman right here who is, I don't know, had 15 failed relationships, right? But before, if they were just good at what they did, that's all that was showcased. So you could look at some stars back in the day and you could say they had multiple marriages, but people weren't even thinking about that. They weren't thinking about every time this person got married because they may have gotten married in a private ceremony. They never changed their name. And they just kept performing at a high level in whatever they were doing, whether that's singing, acting, athletic, what have you. They were just still doing their job. And all people saw was their job. But now you see their personal life, how they are with their parents, how they are in relationships, how they are even interacting with the people who work for them, their staff. Like things get leaked out about how they're interacting with coworkers, the people they work with, where in history past, that wasn't the situation. Common people, common everyday people didn't know the goings and comings of those people,
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to delineate what we're truly discussing because you and I know that role modeling starts right in the home first.
Absolutely do.
So we know that us as fathers, I mean, one of the main reasons we're sitting here together talking about these things because we want to become better role models at every aspect of our life. But our wives, their mothers, are such a role model for them.
Yeah.
And for them to watch my wife do all the things she does for them, aside from the things she does for us as a family, I mean, it's very consistent and it's very underappreciated by them because this is just what mom does. As they grow up, I think they start seeing a little bit more and more. And then it's incumbent on you and I as fathers to remind them of those things that their mother's doing for us, right? We talked about this in the past. And so we'd love to think that that's the role modeling that they're going to take all the way through their lives. We'd love to think that, right? But that's not the case. And so today's discussion particularly lies on the role models that our daughters are exposed to outside of home. That is from friends and adults outside the home to, like we mentioned, highly visible individuals in the public sphere, your pop stars, your movie actors, actresses, all these other aspects that not always bad. They give.
Well, they're not always good either. So,
Well, they're not always bad, right? So for example, you see these athletes that are doing, again, talking about the Olympics, they're doing all the things possible to get to where they're going. And then there's the ones that are not very good, right? We discussed that kind of at length before, some female artist singing about how bad she is at picking men because every one of her songs says, I'm really bad at picking men, but hey, you should do what I do, kind of thing. Yeah. Or other artists that talk about sexualizing themselves specifically to manipulate and to do these things. And so, in the home, you can kind of control that, or you try to control that. Nope, that music doesn't come in here, and so on and so forth. But you and I know that we talked about this with Dr. Aber. Like, You can't just bubble them up because eventually they're gonna get out and then they won't know how to concept the things that they're hearing and watching and doing. So that's where that the job gets a little bit harder.
Yeah. For me, once again, I keep saying this, my girls are really small. You know, my girls are 7 and 5. And so I think by design, there's just a limited access of information that they have to like other adult quote unquote celebrities just because it's not in their interest right now. Now, you know, they watch some sitcoms and cartoons and this, that, and the other. But by and large, when I ask them like what they want to be when they grow up, you know, and I just had this conversation with them recently, and my youngest says she wants to be a singer. And I was like, why do you want to be a singer? And she's like, well, mommy's a singer. So I want to be a singer like mommy. And so then I asked my oldest, you know, what she wants to be. And she says she wants to be a mommy. You know, she wants to one day at 7 years old, that's her aspiration to have a family and to have kids and a husband. And that's what she says she wants to do. And I don't think anything is wrong with that.
Right.
Because that's what they see. That's the level of influence and sphere of influence that they see. Also, I think the people who they also interact with or who we've allowed for them to interact with are also in that similar vein because we have similar friends to us. And my wife has a lot of singer friends. She has mom friends. And so that's what they're exposed to and that's what they see. So at this point, they don't have other influences to say, oh, I want to be a singer like this singer, or I want to go out and do this like this person. But I do want to continue to give them more exposure, more access to different people, historical and present. So you mentioned Amelia Earhart. My oldest, she did her history fair project on Amelia Earhart. So we learned a lot about that. We learned a lot about aviation and flight and how long it takes. And she studied dates and time. We also learned about Bessie Coleman, who was the first Black female pilot. We wanted to learn about all these different things because she was like, I want to know about other female pilots. And so we went down that rabbit hole. And even after all of that, she wasn't like, I want to be a pilot, you know?
Right.
Even after all of that, she still said, I want to be like mommy.
Right.
And that's okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's one of those topics that it's been recently in the news, right? Is there's just very distinct lines of school of thought because for some reason there can't be a middle ground. It's just really weird. Like, how dare we have a middle ground, right? You know, the school of thought of like, no, it's bad to be a stay-at-home mom and not get a career and not be independent and do these things, right? And then in the other school of thought is, no, we're gonna stay at home because that's your role, and so on and so forth. We know those school of thoughts. We've kind of heard them. There was a infamous speech now by a professional football player who put that out in a certain manner that, again, kind of triggered both school of thoughts, by the way. But then there's that centerpiece, right? Where it's like, you could do any of these things.
Yeah.
You can even do kind of both sometimes, right? But for me, when I talk to my girls about these things, my oldest and I sat and listened to that speech. And she was kind of mad, like, well, no, I want to go do these things. I'm like, well, go do those things. But understand it's okay if you later on decide you want to have a kid and you want to be at home. Like,
Absolutely.
all these things are okay. And I try to drive home is that you don't have to live on this side or this side. You can be within here, make up your own mind and have your own thought. And it's okay to change it upon new information and upon new feeling of what you're doing.
I like upon new information that I've gathered, I would like to do this. I would like to step into this category.
Well, you might laugh, but how often do people do that right now?
I'm laughing because it's good, because it's absolutely good. And I tell people this all the time. I'm so glad that I grew up with the mother and the period of time that I grew up in, right? So when I was young, I was fascinated, and I still am fascinated with horses. Love horses to death. I just felt like, man, they're so beautiful and quick, and yeah, and I lived in the country, and so I saw horses all the time. And so I was like, in my little head, in my little mind, my point of reference, I was like, you know what? I want to be a horse when I grow up. I'd like to be a horse. And my mom was like, baby, you can't be a horse. That's impossible. Like, you're a human, you're a person, you can't be a horse, but you can be a cowboy. And so, like, the redirection of that
Right.
to something from impossibility to possible is what I think is so important for us as parents, adults, and also fathers to redirect, to give them the rudder in the direction in which they need to go. So when she told me that, I was like, okay, great. I can be a cowboy. This, that, and the other. And so, I had a cousin that I looked up to at that time, and he had a barn and he had horses and everything else. And he actually bought me my first pony. So I rode, and he told me how to ride and rope and do all the things. But like you said, upon new information for a long time, a long period of time in my little life, I wanted to be a cowboy. But then after going to school and learning about like the medical profession and this, that, and the other, I then in my head, I was like, okay, well, now I want to be a doctor. Now I want to pursue,
Right.
being this. But it was upon new information that was introduced to me. So I kind of went from this streamline of like wanting to be a horse, be a cowboy, then be a doctor. And that is what the new information added to me. So I go down all of that to say, I think also part of that exposure access is to put good female role models in front of our daughters to where it's a possibility. This is a possibility because you are naturally good at these things. My youngest is really good at gymnastics. She is just naturally athletic and is doing all the things. So I do sit up with her. And just the other day, I was watching old clips with her of like Dominique Dawes, famous gymnast, Gabby Douglas, just showing her you can, we haven't gone down to the other gymnasts. They were showing videos of, I think it's like on Netflix now, of Simone Biles. Me and my wife were watching that documentary. We didn't watch it with the girls because I think of the rating that it had on it, but we just wanted to watch it first for ourselves. But it took me down memory lane. And so I wanted to show my youngest these gymnastic routines. She was all about it because she's all about flipping around the house, doing all this other thing. And we had them enrolled in gymnastics, but just showing them the possibility. And I
Yeah.
think what you were talking about before with the Olympics, showing them the possibility. If you work hard enough, you can get to this point as well.
Yeah. And part of that is, so yes, there's a possibility. I mean, representation matters. We know that, right? Being able to see a young girl skateboarding. My oldest is all into skateboarding. When the Olympics happened, Sky Brown was in the Olympics. I believe she's in it this year too. And so she would be like, I'm going to do that. Okay, cool. Let's look at what Sky Brown is doing.
Mm.
So yes, there's a possibility. This is absolutely a possibility for you to do. Now let's run that back. What does that look like? What is she doing? Oh, she's skating 8 hours a day. Oh, she's falling on her butt over and over and over again. Oh, I don't know if I want to do all that. Okay, well, that's cool. But understand possibilities there if you're willing to work for that. Similar to what you're saying, my middle girl, she's a gymnast as well. And so this Olympics, we have, you go on Peacock app or whatever, and you're like, I'm going to set up my stuff. So we have scheduled all the gymnastics stuff, and we have scheduled all the skateboarding thing. Just so happens the skateboarding things today happened at like 4 a.m. or something crazy like that. It was the male, so I knew my daughter wasn't going to be that into it, but I'm like, you might have to get up a little early if you want to watch these. I don't know if I want to do it. I'm like, okay, well, again, if you're not willing to do the work, you don't get the prize at the end. That's just the way it works. But understand that it is possible. You're out there. You can do the thing you want to do as long as you're willing to sacrifice to put the work in.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we try to do with role modeling, that I try to do when they start talking kind of far off, like, oh, this singer or this actor, and it's not just to dissuade them away from that. It's more of like, okay, cool. Let's bring you down a little bit so that you realize not necessarily how hard it is to get to that, right? But
Mhm.
that you can see some realities of our life. And what I mean by that is, I'll say, okay, cool. What about a doctor? We have a family friend who's a doctor. She's a girl. What has she done to get to where she's at?
Yeah.
And she's a successful doctor. And so we'll talk about that, right? Or we'll say, we'll look up a local business owner, right? This woman here has 4 businesses. She's doing these things. What is she doing? Because you can always find a backstory on all of this stuff. And so it's not to dissuade them from shooting high, because I want them to do that. What I do with the high shot is, okay, cool. Let's just look at everything that has to be done for you to get to this point. Because I want them to have the reality. The thing that I think that I've seen in the past is like being told, you can be whatever you want to be. Well, sure, but there's factors. Life has a vote,
Well,
right?
and I just naturally bump up against that. I naturally reject that saying because that same saying would have said that I could have been a horse. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
I could not,
exactly.
I could not have. It was no way possible for me to be a horse. So, for that kind of messaging to be, you can be anything you want to be.
Yeah.
No, you can't. There are limitations.
But
And I
even
look
but
at
even if you keep it in the same species, all right, there's still limitation. We know
yes. There's. Have you seen the movie Zootopia? Okay, so the bunny cop, she says that at the end of the movie, the end of Zootopia, she's like, "Yeah, I can't do it. I might not be this, and I cannot do that, but what I can do is this, right?" Because she had
right.
all these big dreams. She was moving to the big city. She was gonna make a change. She was gonna do all this, and yes, she was the first bunny cop. But she didn't do all the things that she thought she could do. And I thought that was brilliant in the messaging. I thought that was finally one thing that was good in the movie, that it showed that, yeah, even though you could want to do that, there are still limiting factors. There are still things that will limit you. You have to live in reality. I'm not saying dream big because I like to dream big, but live in the reality of what you can do.
Right. And genetics has a vote. We know that. And we talk about that. We'll look at statistics. We'll like, hey, look, there's all these skateboarders. All of these skateboarders that are, you can look up online, by the way. They've been on competitions. They're all here. Do you recognize any of these names? No, that's because it's that much more difficult to get to the pinnacle of skateboarding.
Yeah.
Or with my 8-year-old, she's still, yeah, I'll be a gymnast. I'll be good. Okay, cool. And she's, like you said, she's good. But again, we'll sit down and be like, well, there's, just at her gymnastics gym, like, we'll see all the girls that are there. And she thinks they're all going to the Olympics because she's 8.
Right.
But it's like, well, no, like, maybe one of these girls in here will make that team. There's 5 people on the team. How many gymnasts throughout the United States do we have? And good ones.
Good and good.
So that's the biggest thing. And I try to tread that line carefully because I don't want to discourage them
Right.
from
No.
trying. But going in that route, it's easy to discourage them. Oh, well, man, I won't make it. I'm like, well, I didn't say that. I just said these are the things you have to do to give yourself a chance to make whatever you want to do. Look at the reality of what it is. Look how much it's going to cost you. And then understand if, that's what you want to do. That's what you want to do. Then and that's what I tell my oldest. I'm like, if this is what you want to do and you understand all of this work that's behind the background, then let's go do that. I'll help
Yeah.
you do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I like the Olympics because it's just a culmination of world athletes. Just looking at, and yes, it's now very political and all these other things, but I don't blame the athletes for that. They're there. They've been working to showcase all of their work for 4 years to be
Long,
here.
some of these people have been working their
Yeah,
entire
you're right.
lives.
You're
They've
right.
been working their entire lives for that moment. And like you said, for however long like some of these gymnasts, however long you're on that balance beam, however long you're doing your routine, and you've worked your entire life for that moment, you or like a runner or a racer. Like, I mean, you used to do track and field. You understand like the hard work that it takes to even get to that point, to even get to like a state level, regional level. So let alone you're on a world stage now.
World stage,
Oh,
right? Yeah. But it's really cool, man. It's really cool to see the girls watch girls in the Olympics in these type of environments that kind of give them a view. They give them a window as to what they could aspire to do.
yeah.
I'm talking about sports because that's something that I'm more into, but across the board, like I try to choose movies for a movie night that depicts something like that. I
Mm-hmm.
cannot remember the name of the movie right now, but the three ladies that helped NASA get to the moon. I cannot remember that name of the movie. That movie was amazing for the girls. And not just for the whole racial problems that were going on at the time, but just for the fact that these ladies pushed and pushed and pushed and got through it. Now, I understand we just watched a Hollywood film, right? Got it. Like, is some of that stuff Hollywooded up? Cool. Got it. And I try to explain that to the girls. But I do find that there's a lot of information in there that they can gain from that and a lot of inspiration that they can gain from that in order to help themselves. And then there's other movies that we've watched, and I have to have those conversations with the girls as to like, well, no, this is a little off.
Right.
Here's why, right? I try to not make it my opinion. I try to just give them facts because it's very easy to get opinionated. But I tell them, like, this is why this might not be working the way you saw it on the TV. This is why this was said in this manner. And that's why it's so important, as Dr. Abert told us, like, that's why it's so important to be present and to have that exposure for all these things with the girls so we can have those conversations.
Right. And once again, more things are caught than they're ever going to be taught. So your opinion does matter because that's what our kids are circling around. They're circling around our opinions, our likes, our dislikes, in contrast with what they might like, what they dislike, food, entertainment, education, the whole nine is kind of wrapped around us, putting them in the right direction, in the right time, in the right exposure. And some things they're going to discover on their own, but a lot of things, as we talked about before, I want to be a part of that. I want to help them along the path, right? A lot of times people are just like, hey, we're going to do 80 million different things, right? We're going to try all these out. And what I like about Brene Brown, she talks about this. She talks about having family-based activities, and the whole family is involved in it. And I think that's where you get the bigger bang for your buck, because it's like, okay, we're not doing 80 million things as a family because we as parents still have lives that we have to maintain. You have siblings, they have other things. So if we're fully bought in on this, you're not quitting mid-season. We're going to see this all the way through.
Right.
And then we'll reassess it next year if you don't want to do it. But we're not going to put all this stuff behind you going in the band, and then you're like, oh, I don't like band anymore. Well, some days you're not going to like it. Do you think some of the best pianists in the world liked playing the piano every single day? No, they didn't.
Yeah.
But you need to get over your feelings, out of your feelings that day, and continue on, because greatness could be ahead of you if that's what you're super talented in, if that's what you have an affinity for. Yeah. So I think your opinion does matter.
I agree. I just try to make sure that let them know that, hey, this is my opinion, or this is what I believe, so that they know because it's very easy for us to just be like, this is what this is.
Yeah.
Right. And it may not be it, but because, like you said, our kids take that, our girls take that, and like, oh, I guess this is it. So, especially with my oldest, I try to say, hey, this is my opinion. This is what I think about this. Or if I feel strongly, my belief in this is this. And so I'll let her know that. And then I want her to fire back at me.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you believe about this? I don't believe anything. Okay, well, that's wrong. You got to believe something, right? But you see what I mean? Like, that conversation is important. And so I think it's incumbent on us as fathers to, again, outside the home, because our wives, at least my wife, she does a great job at being that role model for, I mean, they see her do all the things that she does for our family. And although I have to remind them every so often, my oldest is very good at saying thank you and realizing, oh, wow, like my mom did this, this, and this. But outside of that sphere, I think it's incumbent for us as fathers to find those role models for the girls. And they may not connect with that role model or even like it,
Right.
but to find those good role models that have a good backstory that our girls can learn from so that they can push forward. So that's why finding a movie night that has a female role model in there, again, we're talking strictly outside of the home, because if it was up to me, I'd go and I do this. Hey, here's your mom. She's amazing. Here's your grandmothers. They're amazing. Like, think about all the things they've done. We talk about our history as a family, like where my grandmother came from, how she grew up, and those kinds of things. Because I want them to know how strong they are and their lineage is.
Yeah.
Right. But outside of that, it's my job, or I feel it's my job, to protect them from the crappy role models that are out there that unfortunately are the most seen and heard,
Yeah.
and present them with good role models and steer them in those correct directions. And so I think it's incumbent on us as fathers to get involved, be present
Yes.
in female role models, although it seems almost counterproductive, right? Because, well, I'm a dude, like, but we're present in our girls' lives. We're involved and we're being mindful
Right.
of what our girls are watching.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even doing the research with them shows that you care and that you're present. And if it's something that they're really involved in and they really love, and finding those solid mentors that even not just celebrity mentors, even someone that is in your sphere of influence that they can touch,
Right.
that they can dialogue with, that they're solid, right? So this is still outside the home, because I'd like to echo what you say. My wife does a excellent and beautiful job with being a great role model for grace and patience and kindness with my girl.
Absolutely.
And that's why they want to model themselves after her. And she is an amazing artist in her craft. And I know that's why my youngest really wants to model herself after her mother. But then, once again, they're going to be hit with the world. So they step out of this house, and even though they have good role models inside and from the family, they're still interacting with the world. And it is our job to be able to help them decipher what is treasure and what's trash.
How do you all cover female role models for your daughters? Let us know. Send that over to conversations@daughterpodcast.com. You can also go on to this episode and you'll see a link that says send us a message. We'll get those messages as well. Let us know what you guys are doing with your girls to explore female role models, particularly outside the home. But if you want to talk about the role model inside your home, we'll listen to that too. In the meantime, find us on social media, www.daughterpodcast.com. Come talk to us and keep this conversation going. I'm Oscar, here at the Daughter Podcast. Blandon on the other side. Until the next one, see you later.